Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Leadership Trail Mix. In preparation for a share out with a community I'm a part of, I've been thinking a lot about communication, listening, speaking truth with care, and holding space lately. And today, I would like to share some of these thoughts with you. Some of them may sound like a repetition from other episodes, and honestly, that might be the case. But the more I reflect, the more I'm convinced that effective communication can unlock powerful people leadership. This conviction became even stronger after reading Brené Brown's new book, Strong Ground, which I'm obsessed with and can't wait to release an episode to share a few ideas with you. Anyway, back to listening. Listening is hard, right? And why is that? Well, we'd rather talk. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, but for some reason, we still prefer to talk. And we cannot truly listen and talk at the same time. So how can we communicate better? I think the first step is to acknowledge that communication is and will always be messy. Listening and speaking are part of communicating, and while we at times do it without thinking, communicating intentionally is not easy. There is a Brazilian philosopher called João Bosco who once said, "Communication is the success of the misunderstanding." I might actually have already mentioned this here. But anyway, I say something, you listen to something different, and from that point on, we can get lucky and it will work out, or we can get into a car without brakes going downhill into the ocean. That's why we need to listen deeply. Not just listen deeply, but listen with empathy and compassion, which is a way to listen that goes beyond pity and sympathy. Pity listens and says, "I feel sorry for you." Sympathy listens and says, "I feel for you." But empathy listens and says, "I feel with you." And compassion listens and says, "I'm here to help." And it is at those 2 last levels, empathy and compassion, that we have the highest level of understanding of others' experiences. There's a narrative out there in the world that I don't necessarily agree with. It's one that affirms that if I haven't had the same experience as you, I cannot totally understand how you feel. Yes, you cannot. Even if you were my identical twin brother, you would not be able to experience whatever it is exactly the same way as me. And even if I did the same thing as me in the past, and even if you did the same thing as me in the past, studies show that you would probably have forgotten. I'm reading a book called Give and Take by a psychologist called Adam Grant. In it, he describes something called the perspective gap. He tells about an experiment where people were asked to predict how painful it would be to sit in a freezing room for 5 hours. Some people had to make the prediction while having their arm inside of a bucket with warm water, and others had to make the prediction while having their arm inside of a bucket with ice water. Which group expected to feel the most pain in the freezing room? Obvious, right? Those who had their arm in the cold water. They predicted to be 14% more painful than the group that had their arm in the warm water. No big surprises up to now, agree? But there was a third group. A group where people were asked to put their arm in a bucket of ice water, take their arm out of the water, wait 10 minutes, and then make their pain prediction. Their predictions were identical to the group that had their arms in the warm water. 10 minutes was enough for people to no longer be able to imagine the painful experience. This is the perspective gap, and here I quote the book. "When we are not experiencing a psychologically or physically intense state, we dramatically underestimate how much it will affect us." End quote. And to this I would also add that we dramatically underestimate how much it will affect others, which consequently prevent us from being empathetic and extending empathy and compassion to others. What I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't wait to extend empathy or compassion to others until we know exactly what they are going through, or only when we've got through it ourselves. We can do so now, acknowledging that there will always be a perspective gap, and that is okay. That's why listening to understand with empathy and compassion is so important. So, once we acknowledge that communication is and will always be messy, then we need to develop self-awareness, truly understand ourselves and the roles we play when interacting with others and communicating with others. Are we the ones that always speak? Are we the ones that always listen and don't respond? How much airtime are we taking? How much are we repeating the words of others or spending a lot of time affirming our support to what they said, even if it's not necessary? How are these behaviors making people feel? And how much are these behaviors locking people's potential? Another element of the self-awareness equation is understanding our privileges or our positions of power in case we have them. Our voices as leaders carry a lot of weight, and we need to acknowledge that, knowing that sometimes what for us is just a thought, a suggestion, may be seen by others as an imperative, and an imperative that if they don't execute against, can be career limiting. In other words, we can't communicate effectively without being attuned to ourselves and to the environment around us. And going back to the point that we cannot listen and speak at the same time, I have a few questions for us to reflect on. Are there spaces in our lives where we should try to mute ourselves so that we can listen more, understand more, observe more, and empathize more? Beyond that, if not muting ourselves, are there spaces where we should be raising our voices to give a voice or amplify the voice of someone who doesn't have it, have a less loud or less likely to be heard voice than ours? Are there spaces where we are not bringing our voice to the table? And if so, why? What would change that? And lastly, what is the one thing we can start doing today to be good space holders and better listeners for all? Our call to action today presents a few options for you. 1. You can try being silent more than you usually do and listen deeply. Look for a voice to amplify. And number 2 is, if you've been silenced by something, someone, or experiences from the past, what needs to be true for you to challenge those thoughts, those beliefs, and start speaking up, even if afraid? That's it, our reflection for the day. Thank you for listening, take care, and talk soon.